Previously on Part 1, Glenn finished the day's checkups, then healed Lorna, who suffers from a psychological issue, by tying her up and blindfolding her. That, surprisingly, healed her. As thanks, Kay and Lorna seduce Glenn together, but Glenn is quick to refuse. After checking on Kay, Glenn, Saphantite, and Tessalia visit Illy, the same harpy that had been treated by Glenn back when they had been captured by the bandits. Illy had been refusing to take any kind of treatment from the doctor and refused to show up at the temporary clinic, so the doctor visited her instead. Apparently, after being captured by the bandits, Illy had been unable to fly, which had caused her to lose a lot of confidence. Upon arrival, Glenn quickly checks the girl, once again using his sensual methods to get the temperature and whatnot. He finds out that Illy wasn't sick at all. The reason why her feathers were falling was because she was shedding feathers so that new ones could emerge. Illy is not at all happy with the doctor's assessment. She doesn't want to accept that just because she lost some wings, she was unable to fly. The girl rushes out of the house in anger. When Tessalia goes to check up on Illy and catches up with her, Illy reveals that she wants to become a gladiator just like her and fight in the arena. Illy challenges her to a fight, and despite putting up some moves, she eventually loses to the well-experienced Tessalia. During the fight, Tessalia manages to get hold of one of the feathers from Illy, which she hands to Glenn. Immediately, Glenn notices what the issue was. So they quickly gather up all of the feathers that Illy had dropped across town and head straight to her. After catching up with the harpy, Glenn reveals that she was molting, but this wasn't normal molting, which is why she couldn't fly. Illy had the blood of a phoenix in her, which meant that she was shedding her feathers to give place for her phoenix feathers. A few days later, Glenn's assessment turns out to be true, and an elated Illy shows off her new wings, and she is able to fly again. When one of her new feathers falls into Glenn's hand, he notices that it is hot, wondering if Illy may be closer to the phoenix than he first thought. For the next few days, Glenn and Saphantite hold a few seminars in the village to help them understand the proper etiquette of how to take care of their wings and claws. When the time arrives for them to leave, however, some harpies come to the temporary clinic wet and surrounded in white, slimy, super sus liquid. The liquid is apparently all over the forest, and the harpies were unable to avoid it at all. Glenn notices that it is arachne silk, and the two doctors head into the forest to investigate further. In the forest, Glenn and Saphantite run into Arania, a half-human, half-spider hybrid who introduces herself as the famous dress designer for monsters and also as Saphantite's best friend. Arania reveals she is there to catch Illy so she can see her rainbow wings for herself. She had set up traps so that she could capture Illy. When Glenn and Saphantite tell her that there are tons of harpies at the village nearby, the Arachne jumps in happiness and heads there with the two. At the village, a very excited Arania meets Illy. She just wants to stroke her feathers. One stroke, or perhaps even just the tips would do. The following day, Saphantite, Kay, and Lorna are at the hot springs. Glenn had asked Saphantite to go as she was a cold-blooded monster and hot springs could do good for her health. Back at the temporary clinic, however, Arania realizes that Glenn is all alone. Realizing the window of opportunity, she asks Glenn to take a walk with him and takes him deep into the forest, trapping him in one of the traps. Arania intends to seduce Glenn. Seriously, what are this guy's secrets? I'm sure every guy wants to know it by now. Arania tells him that she wants him to become her lover so that she could be close to Saphantite even more. I'm not sure if the doctor has some magic or just the interbreeding between humans and monsters has made the monsters go crazy. Arania begins her seduction, but just then, Tessalia arrives from nowhere and rescues Glenn from the trap. Arania states she and Tessalia are the same in terms of what they want. Tessalia disagrees and tells her that she loves the doctor truly, and, unlike her, she has no hidden motive. Just as they are about to fight each other, Saphantite shows up. She tells them Glenn has no time for courtship, he is a serious doctor who only wants to help his patients with all he can. She reprimands her friends and takes the doctor away. Later that night, as Saphantite and Glenn sit down for a drink, she tells Glenn she loves him. Saphantite tells him that he doesn't have to reciprocate the feelings as she knows he is very busy. Just then, they are interrupted when they hear tremors coming their way. The whole village gathers outside in fear as they witness the giant goddess Gigas marching toward them. They don't know what they have done to anger the goddess and are willing to accept their deaths at her hands. However, Tissalia refuses such a fate for herself and her friends and takes charge to get everyone to work together to evacuate the village. The faster flyer Illy is sent to Lindworm, Glenn's town, to speak with Lady Scotty. Glenn and everyone else gathers their belongings and decide to head back to their town before the goddess can approach any further, but as they leave, they realize that Tissalia was nowhere to be found. The mighty centaur had sneaked off to face the giant goddess alone. Tissalia thinks that if she can slay a literal goddess, there is no way Glenn would refuse marrying her. It all seems kinda sus to fight a goddess just to get a guy. There's some major reverse simping going around here. Saphantite and Glenn manage to get to her just in time to stop her from making any bad decisions. Just as they start to leave once more, the giant catches up with them. The first thing that the giant does is sneeze so hard that the entire area of the forest rumbles in the breeze. The goddess was apparently sick. She introduces herself as Dione Nephilim and had been approaching the village because she had heard that a doctor was there who could treat her. Our super doctor's unconventional and sometimes very inappropriate techniques have managed to spread so far that now literal goddesses were asking to meet him. Glenn checks up on the goddess and finds that she has a simple cold. He offers the giant goddess some medicine and also asks Aranya to make some warm clothes for her so that she wouldn't be walking half naked in the cold. After almost slipping between the goddess's chest, Glenn finally concludes the assessment and decides that it's time to head back home now. After reopening the clinic, Glenn and Tissalia meet up for dinner, which Tissalia thinks is a date. She starts explaining how she had wanted to risk her life for him, but just then, Saphantite arrives as well to clear her confusion. The fight for Glenn is on like wildfire, with perhaps every other monster girl wanting his attention. The next day, everyone arrives at the Marrow Waterways for the commemoration ceremony, where Glenn notices something wrong with Scotty's tail. As Scotty is giving a speech, she passes out in front of everyone. As soon as she drops to the floor, Glenn and Saphantite rush to the scene to give her preliminary aid, which she is taken to the Lindworm Central Hospital. Glenn and Saphantite visit the Lindworm Central Hospital later on to know what exactly the situation was. Even though they gave Scotty preliminary aid, since they weren't her physicians, they had no idea about her pre-existing conditions. Immediately upon entering, Dr. Cthulhu, their master, becomes way too close and personal with Glenn, much to Saphantite's anger. Cthulhu stops and then explains to Glenn and Saphi that, despite her resilient dragon physiology, Scotty has a rare condition that will eventually kill her. She has dragon cancer or something. The case, however, wasn't so simple, as Scotty has no interest in being cured. She wants the sickness to spread and eventually kill her. The case was too complicated for even her to handle. Later, Kunai confronts Glenn and requests him to help Scotty. Once he is inside Scotty's room, Glenn hears Scotty's voice for the first time and finds she has the appearance of a young girl. Scotty reluctantly agrees to be examined and reveals a tumor on her chest that has begun infiltrating her veins and altering her blood flow. She believes it is karma for her dragon ancestors leaving the realm of gods and for her actions during the Great War. This regret is the reason she doesn't want to get treated. She wants to die knowing that her death would end once and for all the sins of her family. Regardless, Glenn uses his questionable methods of examination on the dragoness to check all her vitals and realizes that surgery can fix the issue. Immediately, Glenn asks Cthulhu's permission to perform a complicated surgery, and she agrees after hearing his heartfelt motivations, but worries Scotty will still need convincing, and they require at least one more surgeon. Glenn asks Aranya for her sewing skills to help repair the damaged veins. Aranya refuses at first, but relents after realizing she would get to wear a nurse's uniform like Saphantite. The woman has some serious issues, honestly. The preparations for the heart surgery finally begin. Everyone is ready for the surgery except the patient herself. She hasn't even consented to get operated on, so all that preparation is just useless. Kunai attempts to convince her master Scotty to have the surgery, but Scotty once again tells her that she doesn't want to live. Meanwhile, Glenn visits the Kuklo, a Cyclops, workshop to talk to the boss about creating some surgical tools when he runs into Meme, a pretty Cyclops girl. The girl seems to have a crush on the doctor as well. At this point, it's not even surprising. She lacks a lot of confidence walking beside the doctor and ends up stumbling. She gets stuck in a needle and her clothes are torn off. Even though there are lots of other people there, she ends up slapping the doctor, thinking he saw her in a questionable situation. The only person she should be slapping is her tailor. What kind of cheap clothes were those? When they finally reach the boss, Glenn reveals the situation and gives him the list of items that he would need within the next month. The surgery would be done after that. Kuklo accepts the contract, but tells him that he cannot promise anything about the needles as he lacks the materials to do so. Glenn tells him that everything will be provided by the hospital. Upon hearing this, Kuklo gives the job to Meme. At first, she thinks that she will fail and everything will be blamed on her, but Glenn manages to convince her. Elsewhere, Aranya is at the clinic where she practices for the surgery with Kunai. Meme works hard and is continuously working on the project that has been assigned to her. She ends up working to the point of exhaustion and is brought to the clinic after passing out. It turns out that the reason she was working so hard was that she had found a new method to make stronger and thinner needles. She then shows everyone her new plan, which earns her praise. After this, Glenn heads off to once again convince Scotty to have the surgery, the only task that was now remaining. It's funny how they still don't have the patient, but everything else is ready. Glenn arrives at the central council hall to convince Scotty to have the surgery. Meanwhile, Safentite, Aranya, and Tissalia have not a care in the world and decide to have a girls' night out at a pub. The three girls end up drinking so much that it's late at night by the time they return home. When they return to the clinic, Safentite catches Aranya stealing a dragon scale. Attempting to flee, she is stopped by Tissalia and Safentite. Rather than turn her into the authorities, as every sane person would do, Safentite and Tissalia have a heartfelt conversation with the surprised Aranya. Apparently, Aranya had fallen in love with Glenn as well, and even though this doesn't really explain at all why she stole the dragon scale, the girls decide that the explanation is enough. If anyone can justify this in the comments, please do so. Back at the council hall, Glenn catches up with Scotty, where she once again explains why she refuses to have the surgery. However, Glenn tells her that she deserves to live a happy life, and convinces her that the sins of her ancestors had nothing to do with her. She deserved to let go of those sins because she had no part in them. Scotty accepts this, finally, and decides to have the surgery after all. On the night of the surgery, Glenn, Cthulhu, Safentite, and Aranya operate on Scotty, while all of Lindworm holds a vigil hoping for its success. The night is long and the surgery is intense, as the doctors work rigorously. Thankfully, the surgery is a success and the entire city is made known that their leader was alive and doing well after the surgery. After recovering and resting for some time, Scotty finally manages to arrive at a ceremony for the first time since the surgery. She addresses her people and tells them with a smile on her face that her life was now out of danger and she was doing well. Life can now return back to normal, and Scotty can also now return back to her duties much healthier than before. Later that night, a party takes place in the city, with Glenn bringing back home with him all of the girls that he had treated so far. Safentite is once more angry that they can't have some alone time together. Life is truly normal, at least for Glenn, as several girls flock to his side, as they always do. The man is like a Pokemon master, but instead of Pokemon, he's capturing girls' hearts from every species he can find. Well, will Glenn actually ever find time to choose from one of his ladies, or will he perhaps always stay single and mess with the ladies' hearts? We will find out when we get a Season 2. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching!